Hey players, welcome to Players Guide. I'm talking about what is not so cheap to collect today. What is hot and is going to cost you money if you're collecting or want to get into collecting. So, number one, I would say right now is the SNES. So, while the NES has cooled off a bit, the SNES is still very hot. Games really haven't seen too much of a price dip yet. Now, this could be because of the generation of people that are into collecting these games. It's sort of at its peak possibly right now, and it might come down in the next year or two because of the age group of collectors collecting for this console. Another one that is still very strong and maybe getting close to its peak for now, anyways, that's not to say these consoles, the games won't continue to slowly increase and go up in the future in price, but just how much they've kind of spiked and gone up quickly in the past few years. So that other one is N64. N64 is really hot to collect for right now. Now, if you're looking for like sports games or racing games, you're probably going to be able to find most of those pretty cheap. But if you're looking for some of the better quality games or popular games or rare games, they're not going down in price. They're not cooling off anytime soon. Super Nintendo, maybe, but N64, not yet. I think what happens is we see a generation of consoles or games. They get to such a high price where you have people who are finished school, they're doing uh, a lot of work, or they have a career on the go, and they have a disposable income. Now, that for a lot of people, maybe they, get married or into a relationship or have a child or buy a house or take on some additional expenses that they didn't have before. And I think that's one of the reasons the market cools off on a lot of things like NES. The other thing is prices get so high, people just aren't willing to pay anymore at that point. Or a lot of collectors who got in and were helping make those prices go up are finishing off their set or they have what they wanted, so they're not buying anymore. So there's a lot of reasons why games cool off, but Super Nintendo and 64 aren't cooling off yet. They're not cooling off for a while. Genesis. Genesis has kind of been up there for a while now because not as many people were collecting for Genesis as NES or Super Nintendo, but there's still a lot of good games on the Genesis. The Master System didn't get to be, quite to the level of the Genesis. Also had a smaller library, so it's a little bit easier to collect for. But yeah, the Genesis is not an easy one to get into anymore. For a while, it was kind of under the radar because it wasn't as popular. But even guys like myself who didn't grow up playing Genesis, I I sort of saw the way things were going for Nintendo, and I looked at some alternatives that had some good games, and the Genesis was a great one of them. But again, a lot of other people did the same thing, I think, where they were looking at the prices on some of the Nintendo stuff, and they saw the Sega stuff was significantly cheaper. Well, it's gone up a bit, and it has been for a while. So Genesis not so cheap anymore. PS1 as well. Like so many great games on the PS1. Um, it's got a lot of attention. I know uh, the PS1 Mini or whatever it was called didn't sell so well. I think it could have sold better if it had some better games on it, but it's not as popular. It's not going to be as popular as the Super Nintendo or the NES. Um, but it is getting up there. Maybe it wasn't the right time to release that. Maybe if they waited another year or two, um, for like that generation of people who have a lot of nostalgia and fond memories for that console. Not that people from those other generations didn't continue gaming, but when they come out with those mini consoles, it kind of accommodates to more of a casual gamer, I think, because the person who is really into those consoles and still playing those games probably has most of the popular titles, which is what are released on these compilations. So PS1, there's a lot of good stuff, and people are looking into it and finding out about these good games. There's a lot of great fighting games, and those aren't getting any cheaper. They're still going up. Every time I see a different like fighting game, like a Marvel versus Capcom in a game store, the price is always like $5 more than the last time I saw it. PS2, now PS2 still has some cheap games. There's still some bargains out there if you're game hunting, but there's like PS2's at a stage now where people know what games are rare for it. They know what to look for. They know what games are good. So there's a lot more people with an eye out looking for this stuff. So it's not as cheap as it was, 2 or 3 years ago. Like, it was great. If you were looking for PS2 stuff, a lot of the like, I got the God of War games for, I think, $2 or $3 each. I think it was a 2 for $5 or something like that. Same with like Devil May Cry or any of that stuff. Now, you still might find these deals somewhere in game stores that have an abundance of the stuff, but game stores that don't are probably going to bump up the price on these a bit because there is more of a demand for it. And if they liquidated a lot of that old stock they had, they're going to want to have some of those more popular titles handy because they are going to sell. But yeah, a lot of rare games have kind of come to light what to look for that console. I might do a video in the future about what you should look for and collecting for some of these different systems I'm talking about specifically. But for now, I'm just talking about what is hot and what is not going to be cheap to collect for in 2019. Xbox is still kind of cheap. It's cheaper than PS2. It seems like Microsoft is always not quite on the level that Sony is. And I think that's a good comparison to that right now is like what I was talking about with like Super Nintendo and Genesis. But the original Xbox has a lot of really good exclusives, and it does have some rare games, and people know what these are. People are looking for them now. So you should be too. You should keep an eye out because this stuff is going up in value. It's not going down. It's kind of already hit the bottom of the barrel, so it doesn't have really anywhere else to go but up. GameCube was around that same era, right, as Xbox and PS2. But Nintendo stuff always seems to be more popular. And with the GameCube, it's no exception. The GameCube is hot. These games are expensive. Super Smash Bros. Melee is another game like I was talking about Marvel vs. Capcom. Every time I see it, it's gone up $5. It's the same thing with Super Smash Bros. Melee. I see it more often because it is a pretty common game, but it's very popular and people are paying quite a bit for this game. And that's not the only GameCube game. Like, I think any of the Mario games, like Mario Sunshine or Luigi's Mansion, a lot of the other first-party stuff by Nintendo, not going down. It's getting pretty popular, and it's very hot to collect for the GameCube. And people know about the uncommon and rare games to collect for as well. So anyways, I hope this video helped you. It maybe gave you a little bit of focus or some insight, or you already know this stuff and you just wanted to hear what I had to say. If that's the case, and you have anything to add, there is a comment section, so feel free to drop something there. And, well, that's it, players. Thanks for tuning in.